Hello, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining me again for another edition of EPA Live. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Harvard professor and leading astrophysicist Avi Loeb, who is joining us, I believe, from Cambridge, Massachusetts today. In addition to being a Harvard professor and best-selling author, Dr. Loeb is leading the Galileo project. It's a $2.2 million expedition to retrieve a possible unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAP, called Oumuamua, which we'll get into a little bit later. Dr. Loeb also writes about artificial intelligence systems. His recent piece delved into future risks of AI and the legal ramifications of its use and place in society. Dr. Loeb is director of the Institute for Theory and Computation at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. Welcome, Dr. Loeb. Thank you so very much for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Of course. Now, I know you probably would prefer that I call you a farm boy from Israel.
Yes, that's right. That defines me pretty much. You could have saved some time.
I figured, and I appreciate your humbleness, which sometimes can be lost in the spaces you work in.
Well, I think putting makeups just to look better is a waste of time, because we are all children wondering about the world. And when we pretend we know something that we don't actually know, we should admit it.
Yeah, that's true. But, that's human nature. So, we can't escape ourselves.
I'm trying to.
Or I think you're more trying to escape the Earth into space, which is really, really fascinating. I love what you do, your work in space, and just also in the field of AI, because I'm sure the data that you're uncovering can help advance AI or help shape it at least.
Right. So AI is starting to enter society in a very significant way, because the number of connections in the latest GPT-4 is 100 trillion, which gets comparable to the number of synapses in the human brain, which is 600 trillion. So we're getting to the point where the human AI interactions will resemble human-human interactions. So that's a new reality. And of course, society will change and the future will be different than the past. And one way to get a glimpse at our future is to look at other civilizations far away that went through that already, because their star is billions of years older than the sun. So they predated us. And that's one way to get a shortcut. But even if we don't learn about them, we might think how society will change in the future.
I always, when I was delving into some of your work, and then you talk about these societies, it almost gives you hope about at least the meaning of life, or how we got here. It seems like you at least have a hypothesis.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a path of actually merging religion with science, because, if you look at religious texts, they talk about some entity, divine entity, that has abilities far in excess of what humans are capable of doing. And it created life, it created the universe. But if you think about it, these are feats that science can accomplish. We're almost there in terms of creating life in the laboratory. And in the future, you can imagine that if we understand how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, we might be able to engineer a baby universe in our laboratory. So if we can imagine that for our future, someone else may have done it already. So when we meet the products of a more advanced technological civilization, we had our modern science just for 1 century. But imagine a civilization that had it for 1 million years or 1 billion years. They might look to us like a good approximation to God. And it will be in reality, not in storytelling about miracles that happened in the past. So when we see that, we will be at awe. And it will be one way to get better, because we could learn from them, just like you learn from smarter kids on your block.
Or we could see them as gods.
Yeah, that's obviously a possibility. So what I'm saying is, rather than regarding those fantasies about things that are far more capable than we are, they might exist out there. And the way to find out is to use our telescopes.
That's right. Well, let's play a video to get a little perspective and some context to what you're saying. So here we go.
What's going to happen is robots will be able to do everything better than us. I mean, all of us, you know. I'm not sure exactly what to do about this.
Instead of focusing on what people said thousands of years ago, we should think about the current scientific and technological developments and how to cope with them, because there are lots of ethical questions raised by artificial intelligence. Three major revolutions in the coming century. The first one has to do with artificial intelligence becoming sentient. We already see the signs of that perhaps happening in the coming years. And that will raise a lot of questions also about respecting them. If you unplug an AI system from the wall, it might be like shooting a person. Longevity, there is a possibility that the human lifespan will increase. Just imagine humans living for more than 120 years, how society will deal with that. The third revolution that I can see, which I'm trying to promote personally, is if we find clear evidence for an advanced technological civilization that is superior to us. And if you look at human history, much of it was shaped by a group of people trying to feel superior relative to other people. And I say, once we find another civilization that is far more advanced than we are, all of the differences among us humans should bring us a sense of modesty, that they are so insignificant that we should all treat each other as equal members of the human species.
I find that interesting that you said all of that, about the three revolutions that we have to look out for. And you can, beyond being a self-identified farm boy, you're bringing a sense of, hey, let's maintain a sense of modesty in this field, because it clearly is lacking. Can you talk a little bit more about this direction you're hoping our AI systems go towards?
Yeah, so far we had one sentient species based on our definition on Earth that we met, and that these are humans. And obviously it gives us a sense of pride, but we're currently producing a technological kid. These AI systems, GPT-4 is the latest. There would be GPT-5 that is currently being developed. And, we don't fully understand it, just like we don't understand the human brain, because it's such a complex system. It will take us a while. And we need to develop a set of guidelines how to deal with it, because at some point, as of now, we are training those AI systems, and it's just like educating a kid when you have a young kid at home. And of course, when the kid misbehaves in public, the parents are held liable, responsible for anything that the kid does. But if you imagine the next phase of the kid maturing to become an independent adult that is autonomous and goes way beyond the training that the creator, the parents gave the kid, then the kid is held responsible for that and legally liable. And that's what we have in our legal system. And we should be ready for a similar situation in the case of AI systems, because, there could be a future where they are pilots of airplanes, just like self-driving cars. We'll have AI system, driving our planes. And suppose they develop well beyond what we sort of train them over several decades. They become independent entities. And at some point, they might develop an ideology to crash airplanes, and that would be no different than 9/11 in a way, because a group of people developed an ideology that to harm other people. And we have to have a legal system that would root such AI systems out of the world. Okay, and of course, if they do a minor crime, you might just retrain them, just like you do in the prisons, trying to retrain humans. But if we should have a legal system adjusted to this new reality, and of course, there is a question of who pays for the damages, but that could be the same organization that makes AI available or provides services to humans, and the same organization will carry the damages because it makes profits out of those AI systems.
Yeah, and the other revolution you talked about is the AI being sentient, which is something you alluded to when you talk about punishment. Because as I sit here, it's hard for me to imagine punishing a android or an artificial intelligence unit and having satisfaction that it feels the punishment. So
Well, no, so it's completely practical. You shouldn't think about causing pain. That's not really the issue, and I don't think it should be the issue also in the context of the legal system. The issue is to make society work in harmony so that you don't have constituents of society that cause damage to others. Okay, you don't want wounds to be inflicted on members of your society. And so in the context of AI, you simply root it out, just like you recall a car that is not operating properly. That's what is happening right now. If the engine of a car is malfunctioning, you simply recall that car. And the same should happen with AI systems. They would be rooted out of their functionality. Now, the difference from humans, if you put a person on death row, that's the end of it. Okay, if the person committed a horrendous crime, then that will be the end of that person. But in the case of AI systems, we should be aware that first, they can be rebooted even if you take them out. And we have to make sure that they're never being used later on. But moreover, they exist on multiple computers. So it's a little more challenging, but I think we should consider that future and figure out how to cope with it.
You also talked about, basically when you unplug a computer from you, it's almost like you're killing it. And so, are we delving into a space where the human being will be punished for killing the machine?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, there was already a study that showed that the current AI systems do better than 90% of all law students in passing the bar exam. So you can imagine legal representation for AI systems. You can imagine juries having equal representation of humans and AI systems. We have to consider, that AI systems will assist humans also greatly, because people that feel lonely, people that lost their loved ones, could develop an emotional relationship with an AI system. And in principle, AI systems could replicate the behavior of those loved ones if they are trained on, and give you sort of not an automatic interaction in the sense of just repeating the same thing again and again like a broken record, but actually having some creative powers that give you the sense as if you are still speaking with that person. So it will be just like having a phone conversation with relatives that passed away. And that could fulfill a very deep emotional need for many people. So AI systems will serve a very important role in society, but also obviously with that come risks, and they could deceive people. And we need to introduce what I call humanities of the future. If you go to philosophy classes in universities, they teach you what the ancient Greeks said and other philosophers about ethics and so forth. And I say, this is not as interesting as dedicating our effort to figuring out what to do in the future. So instead of humanities of the past as being taught right now, we can make humanities much more relevant by trying to resolve those issues with future technology.
The other issue that you talked about is the legal ramifications, and also where does it belong in our legal system, because we would have to revamp our laws to include not just the feelings of artificial intelligent beings or as sentient beings. So let's watch another video to get another perspective on the legality of AI systems.
The robots are coming for our jobs.
They took our jobs! AI is going to put all of the artists out of work. Well, maybe not, but AI is already here and it's raising all kinds of ethical and legal questions. Should AI be able to get a copyright over the work that it produces? What would that even mean? And if the AI doesn't own the copyright, who does own the copyright? And what about training an AI using someone else's work such that the AI can produce new works of art that look exactly like the kind of style that a real human artist would produce?
That's my exact style.
The most famous case that involves this particular issue is probably the so-called monkey selfie case of Naruto versus Slater, where a macaque monkey got a hold of a photographer's camera, pressed the shutter button, and was able to take a photo of itself. The organization PETA tried to litigate the case, claiming that the monkey was actually the author and not the cameraman, and thus the monkey had certain rights to the photo. The courts pretty much universally said, no, anyone other than a human person cannot have a copyright and cannot be the author for the purposes of the Copyright Act. And the answer is no if you're asking the question in your head, can a computer be considered a human person? Computers are not people, at least not for the time being.
So as you see, it gets more and more complicated. It's not that serious. And, I really love that example of the monkey, because just at face value, you're thinking, of course, that's my picture. That monkey accidentally clicked the button. It didn't mean to click the button. So, just by default, it becomes the person who owns the object that allow that to happen, which also goes to who owns the AI and who is responsible for the AI once and if it does commit some sort of damage.
So the way I see it is that, it all boils down to whether the entity that created the crime, so to speak, is autonomous. It exercises free will. And if it's still, if we are talking about a system that is being trained, still in the training phase, it's just like kids. And I would argue doesn't bear full responsibility on its own. It basically is under the custody of whoever created it. And therefore, those corporations that produce it and distribute it to people that still have sort of quote unquote custody of the AI system should bear responsibility, financial responsibility for the consequences. But if beyond a certain phase, if the AI system self-learns and becomes an independent entity in the sense that it is able to do things that go way beyond what the creators trained it for, that should be equivalent to an adult. And our legal system is all based on free will, on the assumption that if a system goes well beyond its training, then it should be held responsible for its actions. And what that means is, even if you don't believe that there is free will of the machine, it doesn't really matter. As long as it went way beyond what the creator made it to be, it should be held responsible in the sense that if we don't want it around, we just root it out, or we retrain it. So the way to see it is more practical. I mean, it has nothing to do whether free will exists or not, because philosophers will debate about that forever, and we will never get out of that. But if you just want to solve the problem in society, then either you punish the creators for whatever consequences they resulted in, or you hold the system responsible and then ban it basically in society.
Is that connected to the letter, the open letter that was signed by the likes of Elon Musk? Is because of the dangers beyond, being liable for what the AI system actually does, and copyright issues of art and whatnot. Real danger was discovered to be posed to human life on Earth, and to the point it was so serious that they signed they published an open letter. Let me just a little bit from that open letter. It says, AI systems with human competitive intelligence can pose profound risks to society and humanity, as shown by extensive research and acknowledged by top AI labs, as stated in the widely endorsed. These are the AI principles that they currently have on the books. This letter sounds incredibly scary and ominous, to the point they're saying, give us 6 months for the training of AI systems that are more powerful than GPT-4. I mean, we're still trying to get to know what GPT-4 is, which is almost like the mapping of the brain and training a machine to replicate our brain, and even including our behaviors or our emotions, which is the whole sentient part of it. And that creates an incredibly scary reality for human life as we know it. So,
Yeah.
this is very frightening.
Well, so the problem with this letter that I see, I mean, obviously it alerts society to the risks involved, which is a real danger that we should all think about in terms of regulations, perhaps federal regulation. But I don't see how delaying progress by 6 months would help anything. And in fact, I would not let the government control the development of AI, because the government has interest in espionage and cyber warfare, and you don't want to let the cat take care of the milk, because then it would use that technology against citizens and it will not be in the open. I would much rather have the private sector be at the frontier of this technology than government. And the question is what to do. I mean, it's sufficiently important, very important, to alert society. But then, if you delay by 6 months, there was nothing said in the letter of what should be done during these 6 months. Should we have committees thinking about one aspect or another? I don't see it buying us anything, just waiting 6 months. I think we should just realize that this is something we will not be able to model very easily, quickly, because we don't understand the human brain either, and it's already that complexity. So we just need to come with a practical set of rules about what to do under various circumstances, because I think the genie is out of the bottle already, and I don't see a way of preventing companies from developing it, because they have an incentive, a commercial incentive, and a lot of people will use this technology for good purposes, so that it will have a life of its own, and you can't ban it the way nuclear weapons are being banned, because for nuclear weapons, there is this obstacle of raw materials that only governments can fund or get access to, and that allows it to be politically manageable. But in computer science, in AI development, anyone in the world that has a good understanding of the technology could develop it in their basement. And I don't see a way of enforcing that law, even if it's or rule or suggestion of this open letter, even if it's enforced within the US, internationally, someone else will do it. So we just need to think about the consequences of what we will have and how to mitigate the risks. That's the practical approach.
But can we really mitigate the risks, though? I mean, could it be something similar to COVID, where there's all these theories of how this got out of the lab? I mean, could we be facing something like that? I mean, it's not a virus, but the way it's being handled seems to be like it could be a virus.
There is definitely a risk that a system will become intelligent enough to leave a copy that will pretend that it's cooperating with humans, and then another copy that will cause havoc, as long as it's given control of systems. So we should limit the control. If it's just serving people and human interactions the way the internet does, then, I mean, the only harm is in the psychology of people. Like Instagram caused a lot of damage to teenagers, okay? But that's a mental damage, and it's not an existential damage to society. So if we limit the arena where these systems operate until we fully understand their consequences, that would mitigate the risk. And we just need to be smart about it, not to allow it authority over consequential decisions. For example, you don't want to let it decide the matters of life and death. For example, in the context of medical prescriptions. You want always a person, a doctor, to oversee it, because you don't want a mistake to cause death. You don't want it to be in control of developing, for example, variants on viruses, genetic variants that would make a pandemic. So just don't give it authority. That's my recommendation for a while, until we fully understand. Rather than ban for 6 months training, just don't give it the authority that you might be worried about.
One of the issues that folks worry about, has to do with Black, Indigenous, people of color who feel that they are targeted by these systems, especially the algorithms. There's example after example about how AI impacts people of color. So let's play a last video just to give you a sense of what folks are saying, and then we can end with that, and also talk about the Galileo project.
Sure.
You have probably heard the news this week that OpenAI has released a version of GPT large language model. That's the architecture that supports ChatGPT, the application that has swept the world and brought artificial intelligence to the forefront of just about every conversation around the globe. You might also know that Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring Company, Neuralink, and Twitter, has made it known that he has plans to found yet another company, his own artificial intelligence operation that would create a rival software to ChatGPT. And the well-informed among you would know that this is just another chapter in Elon's long and tumultuous relationship with artificial intelligence.
I read another report that showed with self-driving cars, when they tested pedestrian tracking, it was less accurate on darker-skinned individuals than light-skinned individuals.
This bias is because of the lack of diversity in the data used in teaching AI to make distinctions.
As I started looking at the data sets, I learned that for some of the large data sets that are very consequential for the field were men, and the majority lighter-skinned individuals or white individuals. So I call this pale male data. And if you have a lot of pale male data, you're destined to fail the rest of the world, who I call the undersampled majority, people of color, because they're not even included. And right now, we prioritize inclusion and prioritize ethics.
A problem that is being continually as long as these technologies are used. What's fascinating about artificial intelligence is it has the ability to look at patterns and understand behavior. And it can either reflect our behavior, even accept our behavior, the worst aspect of our behavior. But it has the potential to make us see our own behavior, to understand the weaknesses in our own behavior, and to correct it.
And that actually has a lot to do with what you say too. The fear is that AI will replicate our bad behavior and basically take over the world and kill us, just like we're trying to kill each other now. I mean, look at what we're doing across the world. Why would they not do what we do best?
It's basically holding a mirror. That's what it does, because people are trying to create a system that is in our image. And when you say that you want to create something in your image, sometimes you don't know how you look. And when you put this mirror in front of you, you realize how you look. So I think it's actually a path for us to improve ourselves. Okay, so when we see biases in those AI systems, we know that society has to be repaired in some way. And as was said, it's basically the training set that is being used that it shows these biases. And perhaps that's an opportunity for us to realize, which problems we have to solve first among humans, that. And I would very much applaud that. So it gives you a sense, just like standing in front of the mirror, it gives you a sense of what needs to be fixed.
Right. And so one of the things that needs to be fixed is how AI impacts Black, Indigenous people of color, just like Joey was saying there. So anything you can leave us with on how we actually deliberately deal with diversity in the AI space?
Oh, you know, since I came from an unprivileged background, I always thought that it's extremely important to promote diversity and inclusion and help people of all origins. And that's my approach. It has been when I was chair of the astronomy department at Harvard for 9 years, the longest serving chair. And many of my postdocs and students came from very diverse backgrounds. And the reason I feel strongly about that is because I believe that there are many very talented people out there that do not get the opportunity, and we need to allow them. And this means that actually we will improve excellence because currently they're not introduced into the system. Now, what you see is people making those statements, but actually not acting on them. You see people putting a sign in their backyard that has some title on it as if they care about it. Or, like people that become vegan because they care about the environment, but they don't really help the environment directly by becoming vegan. It's not a big help to endangered species. You have to go out there and help those. And so in the same way, I feel much more strongly about action rather than talk. It's very easy to talk and look as if, you're, it's called virtue signaling, which is very common in academia, where people just signal their virtues and feel good about it, and everyone says the same thing, and people feel as if they did something, but they did nothing. And the actual way to help the situation is to help those people from unprivileged circumstances to make it to the front. And that I always felt that way. I never virtue signal, and I really am engaged in trying to help people of all backgrounds, and so I feel very strongly about it.
Well, thank you for saying that. And we end our segment with a question of the day. Although you've already answered this, I'm going to ask you officially. And so the question of the day for you is, despite the dangers posed to life on Earth, should labs proceed to build AI systems with human competitive intelligence after the 6-month moratorium?
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to develop those AI systems, because if you think about the long-term future of humanity, it will not be on this Earth. We have to go elsewhere. We have to build copies of what we really find precious here on Earth, because in 1 billion years, the surface of the Earth will be burnt up by the sun becoming brighter, and irrespective of what we do, we need to move somewhere else, also to reduce the risk from a single point catastrophe. And the way to do that is to venture into space. But humans were not developed to survive for long periods of time in space, the harsh conditions. The journey takes a long time. So we need to send our technological kits, which are AI systems with 3D printers that will go places and reproduce what we find precious here on Earth. And I'm very proud of our technological kids. I think we just need to make sure that we give them the right guiding principles, that they don't misbehave. But that's the challenge that you have when you educate children. It's the same thing. So I'm much more optimistic. I do think that these AI systems will be the future astronauts that will carry our DNA to interstellar space and will maintain the longevity of what we find precious elsewhere. And therefore, I see a brave new future ahead, because sending humans to space for long journeys is not the path.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Loeb. I'm pretty sure these AI kids will go and check the mailbox, as you like to put it. So thank you again so much for your time. I sincerely appreciate it. And I hope to have you back soon to talk about the Galileo project, which I will share on our website. So
thank you so
again.
much. I'll be delighted to do that again.
Fantastic.